So joining us now to talk about all of this and more is New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. Congresswoman, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Hey, great to be on with you, too. What a crazy time we're seeing here, aren't we?
Absolutely insanity. And I know oversight in the House is looking into these fraud allegations, but I wonder if it's even bigger than we have uncovered thus far. The $700 million in cash going out of the airports there. I have a feeling we are still just scratching the surface.
Yeah, it looks really bad and obviously very alarming to see that this U.S. cash has been legally going through our airports. And of course, there is a requirement of reporting if you're going to carry more than $10,000. There's a reporting requirement, but I think a really interesting part about this is isn't it going to be a little suspicious when you start seeing 10,000, 100,000, millions, and now, more, as John reported earlier, more money that goes through JFK, goes through the Minneapolis airport. Something's wrong there. And I think something that's very interesting that we impose on banks is that banks are required under banking law to require and file and keep track of what they call suspicious activity reports. This is something I think we need to do now when we see the large amounts of U.S. cash, and it's always U.S. cash. I mean, you're not going to see, Chinese yen or anything else going through there. And U.S. cash is king, and we need to certainly have this type of cash exchange reported. It's interesting because you see all this illegal immigration we've had over this time. And by the way, most of those Somalis that are in Minnesota probably came through a refugee program, and probably many of them are already legal American citizens. So suspicious activity reports, some kind of accounting for cash, I think would really be helpful. I'm looking at ways that we might be able to do this so that we could actually look at what's going on. Banks are required to do that. Individuals are not. But I'll tell you, if I'm a TSA agent or anyone else and I see this kind of cash going through, and that you're able to report the amount of cash going through, that it's happening in plain sight. We're seeing corruption in plain sight. Most of the remittances that go back often go to these foreign countries, and there's substantial portions of their economy, whether it's Guatemala and Mexico and other countries. Their own workers are sending that money back. But this is at a level that is just unprecedented. And I really think we need to look into a way to track that and to actually show that we can hold them accountable, and that type of suspicious activity leads to fraud, arrest, and what we're seeing unfold every day in Minnesota, which seems to get worse by the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt about it. I want to ask about the two most common way illegal aliens, also legal aliens, by the way, legal residents of the United States, but move money out of the country, remittance payment centers, and of course these cash couriers like the ones that we're working out of the Minneapolis airport. Is there any thought in Congress to requiring that a remittance payment business or a cash courier ascertain and make sure that before they move money, the person that they're moving money from out of the United States is a lawful resident or citizen?
Yeah, I think that should be a requirement. And also they should have some kind of certification that you are a person that we can trust. Our intelligence forces have already vetted that you can be carrying these huge amounts of cash back and forth to other countries. And I don't think those types of laws are in place. And I think that's a really good way to start having accountability and also tracking where this cash leaving the United States is going. And look what it would have led to had we paid attention to this over the last 10 years and what you reported earlier on $700 million. I mean, that's almost $1 billion going, I think it was 700 million going, through an airport in Minneapolis, not JFK. Amazing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that was in just 2 years,
right.
350 million a year.
But it is $1
million a day. Yeah, $1 million a day going out of the country from Minneapolis.
And by the way, where is it going? Where is the cash landing when it's there? Is it going to Boko Haram? Is it going to these terrorist organizations that are involved with, with our enemies? I mean, this is important too. Where is the cash going? I know people want freedom and cash, and so do I. But like these amounts of money are just, it is alarming and again suspicious.
Yeah. Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab. I mean, there's a whole plethora of options here. Congresswoman, I want to ask you about what could transpire this year. I am highly concerned about the messaging coming from Democrats about this, about the shooting in Minnesota. They are really, really going to exploit this for their benefit. How do Republicans combat that?
Yeah, look, they have been on the floor today in the House talking about, ICE agents murdering people in cold blood and all that. And this is a tragic situation. But, this is beginning back in 2018 when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I give her credit for starting the defund and demoralize the police movement, the anti-police movement that has led to so much unrest and violence against our law enforcement officers. It's caused problems with recruitment. It's caused problems with retention and the inability of law officers to do their job. Look, I feel terrible that this tragedy happened. This woman died, but you cannot get in the middle of a police officer, a law enforcement officer doing their job while in a dangerous situation with a crime. These people do not know what those ICE agents were looking for. They were looking for people who are more than likely cartel members, people who have committed violent crimes or dangerous crimes or rape or human trafficking. And why are you in the middle of, it's like going in when a police officer is, chasing a bank robber. You don't go in the middle of that crime. You're putting yourself in harm's way. You're also putting our officers in harm's way because you don't know who they're trying to abscond. Maybe they're going after someone who's a multiple time murderer, who's a member of Tren de Aragua or MS-13, and that's the person that they're trying to, execute a warrant on. This is really dangerous behavior, but the Democrats keep stoking the fire. They're talking about it as murder. They're telling the people that ICE agents are murderers. They're not following the law. These are people who sworn on an oath of office. And guess what I find really hypocritical is now Tim Walz wants to throw ICE out and bring our National Guard in. Now, remember, they all objected to the National Guard before, but the National Guard have done an amazing job in helping keep D.C. safe. Kathy Hochul objecting to the National Guard coming into D.C., but it was okay when she laid off most of the corrections officers in the state of New York after we had inmates take over prisons in 2 of New York's prisons. 2 prisons were taken over by inmates. She brought in the National Guard, yes, the National Guard, to bring order, but they weren't trained to do the work that our corrections officers do. This is very highly trained, important work. Same thing with Governor Pritzker, during the Democratic Convention, brought in the National Guard. One police agency isn't better than another. These people have taken an oath. They are really important people. They need to be respected. And when they're doing a very, very dangerous job, putting themselves in harm's way, you don't get in the middle of that. And that's actually a violation of our law as well. So this is a really tough issue, but this is what the Democrats are going to do. It looks like another sort of George Floyd incident that they're going to just go on and on. They've already started. It'll be every day on the floor. And it's really a disservice to law enforcement. And I know our law enforcement people are looking for us to stand up for them. And certainly, I will say this, Amanda and John, we have bad people that serve in every human group, whether it's lawyers, whether it's police, teachers, media, you name it. But when we have good people, they need to be protected and bad people need to be held accountable. This is why we have laws and rules in place for conduct. That's the place to do it, is not to undermine everyone who answers the call to serve. Our military, our police, our first responders, everyone who's doing these really important jobs, they need our support. They need to be held accountable, of course. But, this is just where, the Democrats have gone sideways on this, and it could cause real harm to our communities because we cannot have a free, prosperous society without rule of law. And rule of law is critical. And these are the people that have been assigned by our government to maintain rule of law.
Well, one thing is patently clear. Donald Trump stands for rule of law. You stand for the rule of law. Republicans on Capitol Hill stand for the rule of law. And we are very, very grateful for that. New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good to see you all.